The laughter echoed across the Grand Causeway. Not loud, not cruel, just confident enough to make every noble nearby smile along with her. Alien Princess Elira stood beneath the banners of the Galactic Empire, her jeweled crown shining in the afternoon sun. Around her, diplomats, generals, and royal guards watched the arrival of a man they had heard about for years. A human. The legendary warrior humanity had chosen to represent them. When he finally emerged from the crowd, disappointment spread through the court. His armor was scratched and dented. His face carried deep scars. One eye was surrounded by old burn marks. He looked less like a hero and more like a survivor who had simply refused to die. The princess tilted her head. "That's him?" she asked. A few nobles chuckled. Then she laughed. "This is the warrior the humans boast about." More laughter followed. For a brief moment, the mood felt light, almost entertaining. Then something changed. The sound died. Not gradually. Instantly. The princess noticed it first among the soldiers lining the causeway. Veterans. Decorated officers. Warriors who had fought in campaigns across dozens of star systems. None of them were laughing. In fact, several looked uncomfortable. One old admiral stared at the approaching human with an expression that looked disturbingly close to respect. Why? What was everyone seeing that she wasn't? The human kept walking. Slow. Steady. Unbothered. As if the mockery meant absolutely nothing. A cold breeze swept through the stone avenue. The atmosphere shifted. And suddenly the princess found herself watching him more carefully. Those scars. There were too many. No ordinary soldier survived wounds like that. No ordinary soldier kept walking afterward. The human stopped at the foot of the royal platform. Silence swallowed the crowd. Then, from somewhere behind the throne, an elderly war hero whispered words that sent a chill through the entire court. "Your Highness." His voice trembled. "You have no idea who you just laughed at." And for the first time that day, the princess wasn't smiling anymore. The old admiral's warning hung in the air. No one spoke. No one moved. Even Princess Elira seemed frozen as the scarred human stood before the throne, expression unreadable. But before anyone could break the silence, alarms erupted across the palace. A sharp electronic pulse echoed through the capital. Once. Twice. Then continuously. Every face in the court drained of color. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Within seconds, holographic displays ignited across the chamber. Star maps filled the air. Red warning symbols flashed across entire sectors of Imperial space. The room exploded into chaos. Commanders rushed toward communication stations. Royal advisors shouted over one another. And then the truth appeared. Another world had fallen. Not a border colony. Not an isolated mining station. A core world. One of the Empire's most heavily defended systems. Gone. The Void Swarm had struck again. For nearly 20 years, the galaxy had been fighting a nightmare no civilization could stop. The enemy did not negotiate. Did not retreat. Did not fear death. Entire fleets vanished after encountering them. Planetary shields failed within hours. Civilizations thousands of years old were erased in days. Nobody understood where the swarm came from. And nobody knew how to defeat it. That uncertainty terrified the galaxy more than the enemy itself. Because how do you fight something you don't understand? The answer, so far, was simple. You don't. You survive as long as possible. Then you disappear. The hologram shifted. A new target appeared. The Imperial capital. The very heart of galactic civilization. The swarm was coming. And according to military projections, they would arrive within hours. A cold silence swept through the room. For the first time, Princess Elira looked afraid. Not for herself. For everyone. Billions of lives depended on decisions made in the next few minutes. Then another transmission arrived. This one carried footage from the destroyed system. The images were horrifying. Burning cities. Broken fleets. Entire orbital stations drifting through space as debris. But one detail caught everyone's attention. A handful of ships had escaped. Only a handful. Human ships. The room turned toward the scarred warrior. Whispers spread through the court. People had heard rumors. Stories. Impossible stories. A human commander leading desperate evacuations behind enemy lines. A fleet surviving battles that should have destroyed it. Colonies rescued from certain death. Entire populations saved through sheer determination. Most had dismissed those stories as exaggerations. Now they weren't so sure. The princess stared at the human. This wasn't the broken soldier she thought she had mocked. This was someone who had walked through disasters that consumed entire civilizations. Someone who had faced the swarm and lived. The realization unsettled her. But the next revelation was even worse. An intelligence officer stepped forward. His hands were shaking. "We've confirmed the reports." The room held its breath. The officer swallowed hard. The only fleet that has ever defeated a void swarm assault. His eyes shifted toward the human warrior. Was commanded by him. Suddenly, every gaze in the chamber locked onto the scarred human. Because if that report was true, then the most important person in the galaxy had been standing before them the entire time. And nobody had realized it until now. The most important person in the galaxy didn't look important at all. No golden armor. No ceremonial titles. No grand speech. Just a scarred human warrior standing quietly while an entire imperial court stared at him. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Princess Elira broke the silence. "If you've defeated the void swarm before." Her voice was steady, but curiosity had replaced arrogance. "Then tell us how." The question echoed through the chamber. Every admiral leaned forward. Every diplomat waited. Billions of lives now depended on the answer. The human looked at the massive star map floating above the court. Thousands of worlds. Thousands of fleets. The greatest civilization ever assembled. And yet fear filled every corner of the room. Finally, he spoke. "You think the swarm is stronger than you." The room remained silent. "You think they're smarter than you." A few commanders exchanged uneasy glances. "You're wrong." The statement landed like a thunderclap. For 20 years, nobody had spoken about the enemy with that kind of certainty. The human stepped closer to the hologram. "The swarm wins because you keep fighting the war they want." Confusion spread through the court. What did that even mean? Before anyone could ask, the warrior activated a battle recording. A massive fleet appeared above the star map. Imperial ships. Destroyed. Another recording followed. A different species. Destroyed again. Then another. And another. Every battle looked different. Every defeat looked unique. Yet the human pointed at the same detail each time. The pattern. Slowly, realization spread through the room. The swarm always attacked fear. Whenever commanders tried to protect everything, they lost everything. Whenever they hesitated, they died. Whenever they chose safety, the enemy exploited it. The warrior turned toward the court. The swarm understands survival. Then his eyes hardened. But humans understand sacrifice. The room went completely still. Those words carried weight. The kind that could only come from experience. The human zoomed the map outward. Entire sectors appeared. Worlds highlighted in red. Worlds humanity had abandoned. Worlds humanity had evacuated. Worlds humanity had willingly surrendered. Gasps spread across the chamber. To the Empire, those decisions looked like failures. But the warrior shook his head. No. His voice remained calm. Those were victories. Suddenly the room erupted. Commanders protested. Politicians argued. Several nobles openly laughed. Victory? How could surrender ever be victory? Then the human showed them what happened next. The planets weren't defended. The populations were gone. Resources removed. Infrastructure destroyed. Nothing useful remained. The swarm captured empty worlds. Worthless worlds. Trap worlds. Every sacrifice had forced the enemy farther from its supply routes. Farther from its command structure. Farther from support. The room slowly fell quiet. For the first time, people weren't seeing defeats. They were seeing strategy. A strategy measured not in days or months, but years. Princess Elira stared at the battle projections. Her entire military education suddenly felt incomplete. The Empire measured success through territory. Humans measured success through outcomes. Those weren't the same thing. Not even close. The warrior expanded another file. This one showed civilian evacuation footage. Families boarding transport ships. Children being carried into shelters. Entire cities relocating before enemy fleets arrived. The court expected military statistics. Instead, they were watching ordinary people. The princess frowned. Why show us this? The human didn't hesitate. Because this is our advantage. Confusion returned. Advantage? The civilians on the screen looked terrified. Exhausted. Broken. The warrior nodded toward them. Every species fights for victory. The image shifted. Human rescue crews appeared. Volunteers. Medical teams. Engineers. Farmers. Teachers. Ordinary citizens rebuilding destroyed settlements. Again and again. No matter how many times disaster struck. The princess watched carefully. Something stood out. Nobody was quitting. Nobody was waiting for orders. Everyone was moving. Helping. Building. Fighting. The realization hit her slowly. Human strength wasn't coming from their fleets. It wasn't coming from technology. It wasn't coming from weapons. It came from something much harder to destroy. Their willingness to endure. Their refusal to stay down. The warrior finally looked directly at the throne. We don't survive because we're fearless. His voice grew quieter. Almost personal. We survive because fear doesn't get the final vote. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then a communication officer suddenly rushed into the chamber. Panic filled his face. A new transmission had arrived. Fresh intelligence from the front. The swarm had changed course. The enemy fleet was accelerating. And according to updated projections, the imperial capital had even less time than expected. The room exploded into chaos once again. Admirals demanded immediate evacuation. Politicians called for emergency retreats. Several worlds were already preparing surrender terms. But through all the panic, one thing stood out. The human wasn't worried. Not even slightly. Princess Elira noticed it immediately. While everyone else searched for escape routes, the scarred warrior was studying the star map, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Then he reached toward the hologram, marked a single location, and smiled. For the first time. A dangerous smile. The kind that appears when a hunter finally sees the trap closing. And suddenly the princess realized something terrifying. The human hadn't come to save the empire. He had come because the enemy was finally standing exactly where he wanted them. The human was smiling. Not because the situation looked hopeful. Not because victory was certain. But because the enemy had finally done exactly what he expected. Across the command chamber, alarms blared non-stop. The holographic star map burned crimson. Thousands of enemy signatures flooded toward the imperial capital. The void swarm wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. Entire sectors disappeared behind the advancing wave. For everyone else in the room, it looked like the end. For the scarred human warrior, it looked like the beginning. Princess Elira watched him carefully. Why are you smiling? The question cut through the panic. The human's eyes never left the star map. Because they took the bait. Silence. Then confusion. No one understood. The largest enemy force ever recorded was approaching their homeworld, and somehow this human believed that was good news. Then he pointed toward the center of the hologram. The capital. Several admirals frowned. What about it? The warrior zoomed outward. Trade routes appeared. Supply corridors. Jump gates. Strategic systems. Dozens of interconnected pathways stretched across the galaxy. Then he highlighted a single pattern. A pattern nobody else had noticed. For years, the swarm had been spreading wider. Further. Thinner. Every conquest demanded more resources. More coordination. More ships. The enemy looked unstoppable because everyone focused on its size. The human focused on its weaknesses. And weaknesses grow with size. The room slowly fell silent. Then the realization hit. The capital wasn't the target. It was the Lu. The human had spent years shaping the battlefield. Every evacuation. Every withdrawal. Every abandoned colony. Every painful sacrifice. All of it had pushed the enemy toward one location. One final killing ground. The imperial capital. The very place everyone thought they were defending. The trap had been set long before anyone realized it existed. A nervous admiral stepped forward. "And if you're wrong?" The room held its breath. The warrior answered immediately. "Then we're all dead." No hesitation. No false comfort. Just truth. Oddly enough, that made people trust him even more. Because for the first time, someone wasn't pretending the danger wasn't real. The battle began 3 hours later. The sky itself seemed to darken. Millions of enemy vessels emerged from hyperspace. The sight was overwhelming. Even veteran commanders stood speechless. Princess Elira watched from the command platform as defensive fleets moved into position. Compared to the swarm, they looked insignificant. Tiny. Hopeless. Yet none of the human ships retreated. Not one. The first wave struck. Explosions lit the void. Entire formations vanished. Shockwaves rippled across nearby sectors. The swarm surged forward. Exactly as planned. The human fleet yielded ground. Again. And again. And again. Imperial commanders panicked. Reports flooded into command. Lost squadrons. Destroyed stations. Broken defensive lines. Everything appeared to be collapsing. Then came the pattern interrupt. The enemy crossed an invisible boundary. The human smiled. Now. At first, nothing happened. Then entire regions of space ignited. Thousands of dormant weapons activated simultaneously. Ancient asteroid fields exploded. Hidden mines detonated. Collapsed jump corridors trapped enemy reinforcements. Artificial gravity wells activated across multiple systems. The battlefield transformed instantly. What looked like open space became a maze. The swarm's massive formations shattered. Chaos spread through enemy ranks. For the first time in 20 years, the void swarm stopped advancing. Princess Elira stared in disbelief. The impossible was happening. The enemy wasn't adapting. It wasn't counterattacking. It was confused. The human had spent years studying them, learning their habits, predicting their responses. The swarm wasn't being defeated by superior firepower. It was being defeated by superior understanding. But the battle wasn't over. Not even close. A new alert flashed across the command deck. Enemy command vessels had appeared. Gigantic ships. Larger than cities. Protected by thousands of escorts. If they escaped, the swarm would recover. Everything depended on destroying them. The problem was obvious. No fleet could reach them. No fleet except one. The human flagship. Princess Elira immediately understood what was happening. No. Her voice was barely a whisper. The warrior was already moving toward his shuttle. Several admirals tried to stop him. Others demanded alternatives. There weren't any. The enemy commanders had finally exposed themselves. A rare opportunity. One chance. One shot. The human turned toward the court. Toward the princess. Toward the empire that had mocked him only hours earlier. His expression remained calm. Finish the fight. Then he left. The flagship plunged directly into the heart of the enemy formation. Every screen in the command chamber followed its progress. One ship. Against thousands. Against impossible odds. Against the same nightmare that had consumed worlds. The battle became a blur of fire and destruction. Human escorts sacrificed themselves one by one. Pathways opened. Closed. Opened again. The flagship pushed deeper. Closer. Closer. Finally, it reached firing range. The command vessel filled every display screen. The human transmitted one final message. No speech. No farewell. Just 4 words. See you on Earth. Then the stars exploded. A blinding wave of light tore through the battlefield. The first enemy command ship vanished. Then another. Then another. Chain reactions spread across the swarm formation. Entire sectors erupted. The impossible became reality. The enemy began retreating. Retreating. For the first time in recorded history. Celebrations erupted across the fleet. Commanders cheered. Soldiers embraced. Worlds rejoiced. The nightmare was ending. Then the communication screens went dark. One by one. Until only silence remained. Princess Elira stared at the empty display where the human flagship had been moments earlier. No signal. No response. Nothing. Victory had finally arrived. But the man who made it possible had disappeared inside the firestorm. And nobody knew whether the scarred human warrior was still alive. 3 days passed. Then 4. Then 7. The celebrations faded. The victory remained. But one question haunted the entire galaxy. What happened to the human? Across hundreds of worlds, rescue ships searched the battlefield where the final confrontation had taken place. Wreckage drifted through the darkness. Broken warships. Fragments of stations. Silent reminders of the largest battle in recorded history. Yet there was no sign of the human flagship. No distress beacon. No transmission. Nothing. The Empire declared the victory a miracle. Citizens filled streets with banners and lights. Entire planets held ceremonies honoring the fallen. But Princess Elira noticed something strange. Whenever people spoke about the battle, they always ended with the same question. Did he survive? The answer mattered. More than anyone expected. Because the scarred warrior had become something larger than a commander. He had become proof. Proof that the impossible could be beaten. Proof that fear wasn't destiny. Proof that survival wasn't the same thing as surrender. And now he was gone. The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone. Especially the princess. Every day she visited the central command tower. Every day she reviewed rescue reports. Every day she hoped for different news. Every day she received the same answer. No contact. No signal. No trace. Then came the 8th day. Everything changed. A routine sensor operator noticed an anomaly near the outer edge of the capital system. A tiny energy signature. Weak. Unstable. Almost invisible. At first, nobody paid attention. The war had left millions of pieces of debris drifting through space. Most strange readings turned out to be wreckage. This one should have been no different. Then the identification code appeared. The operator froze. His hands trembled. He checked it again. And again. Then he triggered a priority alert across the entire command network. Within minutes, every major screen inside the imperial capital displayed the same image. A ship. Small. Damaged. Barely functional. Drifting toward home. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the identification finished processing. The vessel belonged to the human flagship. The room erupted. Celebrations exploded across the planet. People flooded into streets. Military officers abandoned protocol. Even seasoned admirals openly cheered. Against every prediction. Against every probability. Against every expectation. The human had survived. Again. Hours later, emergency crews escorted the battered vessel into the capital's primary docking complex. Princess Elira arrived before anyone else. She stood near the landing platform as thousands gathered around the massive hangar. The atmosphere felt electric. Not because of politics. Not because of royalty. Because everyone wanted to see the man who had defeated the Void Swarm. The ship finally touched down. Silence filled the hangar. The loading ramp lowered slowly. Smoke drifted outward. Damaged lights flickered. Footsteps echoed inside the vessel. Then a lone figure emerged. The scarred human warrior. Alive. The crowd erupted. The sound was deafening. Soldiers pounded their fists against armored chests. Workers shouted. Pilots raised their helmets overhead. For a moment, the entire hangar became one enormous roar of relief. Yet the human reacted as if none of it belonged to him. He simply walked forward. Tired. Exhausted. Still carrying the same scars. Still wearing the same damaged armor. Nothing about him looked legendary, and somehow that made the moment even more powerful. Princess Elira stepped toward him. Memories flooded back instantly. The causeway. The laughter. The mistake she made when she judged him by appearances. Back then, she had seen a broken soldier. Now she understood what everyone else had recognized. Those scars were not signs of weakness. They were evidence. Evidence that he had faced horrors most beings couldn't imagine. And kept going. Again. And again. And again. The princess slowly lowered her head. The crowd fell silent. No one expected what happened next. A royal bow. Not to a king. Not to a ruler. Not to a conqueror. To a warrior. To a human. To the man who had saved countless worlds. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then an elderly admiral stepped forward and saluted. Another followed. Then another. Soon thousands of soldiers stood at attention. The gesture spread through the hangar like a wave. One by one. Rank after rank. An entire empire saluted the human warrior. The man remained silent. But his eyes revealed something deeper than pride. Relief. Because the mission had never been about glory. It had always been about protecting people. The princess finally spoke. Her voice carried across the silent chamber. The galaxy feared the Void Swarm because it had never been defeated. She looked directly at the human. But the Void Swarm feared humanity because humanity never stopped fighting. The hangar erupted once more. Yet beyond the celebration, beyond the victory, beyond the applause, a classified report waited inside the command tower. Recovered from enemy wreckage. Unread. Unexplained. And according to its contents, the Void Swarm had not been invading the galaxy. It had been running from something. Something even worse. Something now aware of humanity's existence. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, something had just started moving.